Yeah, hello and welcome to our round recap show for round 6 of this year's Norway Chess, and it's called Altibox Norway Chess Tournament. Yeah, this is a little bit different. We don't have a recap video, but we have a recap show, which is a nice thing to have, I believe, because we've got the viewers here on YouTube. You can ask questions about the games, or if you want to suggest a move, we can look at them together. This is really nice. So let's get going. We have 5 games to go through, and I want to look at all the games, but focus on a couple of key games that are more interesting than the others. Some are not that much of a thriller, we have to admit. So let's have a look at some of the games. I'm going to start with the world champion. Got the game Carlsen, Vachier-Lagrave. Of course, you have to see that the clocks. I use the layout from a Blitz game, so you have the clocks here. I hope this is remotely okay what they display. Yeah, let's get going. It's a fairly straightforward thing here for Carlsen. He has to do something in this tournament. He lost a game earlier, very nice game against Aronian, and did not win a single game. So he has to really badly go for a win. So interesting to see what he's doing to play for a win. And he plays the London system of all openings. Not a really sharp opening to try to win. However, what that opening certainly achieves is it avoids any super clear preparation. Some sharp lines that maybe simplify the game are not possible. So he wants some kind of game with many pieces on the board that lasts a bit longer, even though there is no big hope for an opening advantage. MVL goes with G6. This is probably one of the better options for black to keep it a little bit more dynamic. I personally play C5 there, but G6 is of course fine, going for a King's Indian setup. I think all this is completely normal. And now Bishop E2 played by Carlsen. That's interesting here. You can play H3, Bishop E2. Bishop E2 is a bit more flexible than H3. D6 and now H3, making sure that a move like Knight H5 can be answered with Bishop H2, so that piece is kept on the board. Yeah, black went C5, castles and queen to B6. And now you have to somehow take care of the B pawn. Question what to do with it. And Carlsen is answering it with, okay, I'm ignoring the pawn. Interesting. So MVL now has the chance to take the pawn, which he didn't do. If he would have taken on B2 after Knight C4, the black queen has an issue. Yeah, the queen doesn't have many natural squares. And queen C3, which is one option, is answered with rook b3, and the queen is trapped. You cannot really avoid this rook b3 threat. And queen b5 obviously cannot be that great. So black does not take on b2, but rather takes on d4. Yeah, now after knight c4, queen back, e takes, material is equal, and we see a fairly common structure where e and c pawn are traded. Black has this option to play with b5, and this way securing the knight a little bit on d5. The move c4 is not easily possible. So a6 played by MVL, and Carlsen plays c3, making the center more solid. What I think is that this position is maybe very slightly better for white, because after a4, and this is what we see in the game, black probably is a little bit worse on the queen side, just a little bit. Whatever he does, I think white has a little bit of something, but it's not much. He played rook b8 now, making sense. b5 was attacked with a4. And I think b4 is probably less reliable after c4. In the game, we had rook b8 and the capture. And now, okay, this is slightly weak on b5. It is very little, but we've seen Carlsen do something with those little advantages. Yeah, rook e1. Knight a5 and queen to b1, protecting the b pawn, basically anticipating knight c4. I think this was a good maneuver. With the knight on c4, b5 is less of a problem. And Carlsen now doesn't really find anything better than just keeping the position as is. With b3, it gets rid of the c4 knight, but the whole structure is still fairly unpromising. Yeah, black played bishop e6, looking at this. And now, yeah, white doesn't really have much else in what he did. I mean, he could have taken on b5 immediately to simplify, but he tried. He actually did that. I'm sorry. I had the wrong. I read my notes wrong. Yeah, we had this trade, and now it's very difficult to see where white should get some kind of tension into this position. MVL just went back to d5. He has this blockade of the c4 square, and now after rook a3, bishop f6, he covered the e7 pawn. There's not really much way forward. So after knight c4 now, it's pretty much an invitation to simplify to nothing. But there is nothing that white can do. So we have all those trades, and this is a completely equal position. With e5, we have the start to trade everything down, and they have to play till move 40. I think to move 40 to make the draw. And here they agreed to a draw after everything was traded down. Yeah, that was a little bit of a dull game, and I'm really not sure that this kind of opening with bishop f4 is the way to play for a win. I don't know. Yeah, of course it's easier once you see the result, yeah, to judge. But I found this a little bit of a bleak effort, yeah, to win a game. Let's have a look at the next game, and we're going to go for, I'm just doing it in the order of the ICC, Nakamura Karjakin. If I'm not mistaken, Nakamura is in the lead in this tournament. I did not really watch the first couple of rounds because I was busy doing own coaching work. In this game, we have a Nimzo with queen c2, very classical variation. By the way, there have not been any questions from the chat yet. If you have any, did I say they agreed to a draw? Yeah, all pieces were traded. Yeah, okay. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. The classical Nimzo, and Karjakin goes for d5. He has played various lines there. d5 is currently considered to be one of the most reliable ones. Here Nakamura captured on d5. The main alternative is to move a3, which currently is not regarded as super critical because of this variation. Here white is struggling to find even a slight edge. This is why c takes d5 is played a bit more frequently, I think, nowadays. And now black has a choice, which might surprise some people, as e takes c5 is a completely normal move, opening up the bishop. But queen takes d5, as played by Karjakin, is actually pretty decent. The idea of this move is that simply this is attacked, and white has to react to that. After knight f3, black has this interesting move. That is a really unconventional solution to this position. Or there's e3, which makes queen f5 kind of stupid, yeah, because then you have bishop d3. c5 played by Karjakin, bishop d2, takes. This is actually an interesting decision, bishop takes, because b takes c3, I think, is a bit sharper. Yeah, here white keeps the bishop pair for a bit, or keeps the bishop pair behind the pawn chain. There's a question in the chat: is c takes d5 the Carlsen variation? It's not really called the Carlsen variation. Carlsen is mostly used as a name for the structure, and this is the Carlsen structure, which trades the c pawn against the e pawn. So this is the Carlsen structure. Yeah, you're right. Okay, we had e3, c5, bishop d2, takes. And this is actually a super solid choice for white. Bishop takes e3, where it's really difficult to lose a game, but it's also difficult to win. And we see why. Karjakin plays the main line. Takes, knight c6. Yeah, and now with the bishop being attacked on d4, white has to make a choice. The capture on f6 is considered to be extremely harmless. Yeah, we give up the bishop pair and black is perfectly safe. The h7 pawn is not a real weakness, and we have to see that it's really not much that white can play for. So this is played. Castles, knight f3, and now rook d8, bishop e2, knight queen e4. Knight e4 is also moved. Yeah, and it's very difficult now to not trade. Yeah, where is the white queen going? Yeah, you can go to b3, but after e5 and potentially this, that doesn't really lead to much. So white played rook c1, trades, and now knight e4 tries to get the bishop pair back. Yeah, white has to do something, otherwise, I mean, if black just gets to take on c3, it's just completely dead. So knight e5 was tried. This is a bit more interesting. If black now takes on c3, white captures here, and in this position, white definitely has a pull. Yeah, this is a weak pawn. It's not lost or anything. Black has defensive resources, but it's not nice. So bishop d7 was played instead. Knight c6, bishop c6. And here we get a structure that is not uncommon in the Nimzo. Sometimes black just goes for simplification on c and d file. It's just a completely symmetrical structure where white has the pair of bishops. So white will definitely be better for basically the whole game, but it's extremely difficult to win because of the symmetrical nature of the position. This is a very typical choice for Karjakin, who sometimes just wants to destroy the game with black. Yeah, just play something which is passive, but is impossible or very tough to break down. We get what I mentioned. Check. We have this ending with the bishop pair, but black is reasonably active. White actually manages some headway. Yeah? He had a threat of rook d8 mate, so knight d7 was played, and here we got the rooks traded. So this ending, white can play forever and ever and ever, but he will probably not win. The issue simply is the completely symmetrical structure. Yeah, in order to make something of your bishop pair, you usually need some non-symmetrical features of the position. You need to get a pass pawn, and it's very difficult here to do something. Nakamura tried, obviously, but you don't really get far here. What is very typical is the setup with the bishop here and pawns on dark squares. And here got more trades, and f4. Yeah, again, white is always better, but winning is an entirely different story. Yeah, black is covering the h5 pawn, the e5 pawn is covered by the knight, and yeah, how do you ever make progress? In some cases, white might be able to win a pawn, but oftentimes this comes with a price tag going into opposite colored bishops. So here I don't really have much suggestions to make. White is always better, but we know how Karjakin is able to hold those positions very reliably. Yeah? The pawn on f6 is not really a huge issue, and he puts everything on dark squares. Yeah, okay, this is basically giving up, yeah, but it still continues a little bit. And here the draw was agreed. There's a question by Marcus in the chat if he should play h5 or not in such positions. So we go a little bit back and check what he was talking about. Here, yeah, here h5. Yeah, let's have a look there. I need to look a little bit myself if I consider h5 correct here. It's not an easy decision. Huh? I'm not sure that I would have played it, as I don't really see a particularly huge threat here. If I just stay, I mean, like, let's say I play this move. I mean, white is not going here. That looks entirely strange. So probably will go back, and then I just again do nothing. I'm not sure. I don't think h5 is totally essential in this position. I could be wrong, but I think it's not much of a big deal if you play it or not in this particular case. The next game I want to check is Giri against So. Let's jump into this game. We have a symmetrical English, and Giri somewhat surprisingly plays knight c3 here, which is not considered to be very critical because black gets this dark squared control in. I've played these setups, of course, myself with both colors, so it's not like it's terrible. It's just that usually with white you want to play more aggressively with d4, but he had a particular idea in mind, Giri. He played knight f3, and here black has a wide range of possibilities, and so plays e6. This is something that he has played before. And now Giri's idea kicks in. He plays the move h4 very early on, pushing the h-pawn. The h-pawn moves have become very popular in all kinds of situations, and here it does make some sense. How should black react? Whatever reaction he has some kind of drawback is strong, but it introduces some specifics to the position that makes it interesting. For example, it's tough to completely ignore the pawn. Yeah, like if you play, let's say, knight e7 and then h5, this is going to be somewhat of a pain. Yeah, the move h6 can be quite tricky, and white also can just keep the tension. Yeah, and just wait for a moment if he wants to take or play h6. As long as the pawn is on h5, you have a hard time to I didn't want to do that. You have a hard time to castle. So black has to react in some way. You can of course go h5 or h6, but this is also some kind of weakness. So played it in an interesting way. He played knight to f6, simply stopping h5 with the knight. Okay. What this does, however, is it allows white to play d4. I'm sorry, play d4. So we get this central formation, which at first looks a bit weird because the move e6 doesn't really fit into this position all that much. Castles, and now black goes d5. At first I was quite surprised that this position was on the board, because I felt this must be better for white, pretty straightforwardly. But it's not all that clear. Yeah, when we check this, c takes, knight takes d5. And it's an isolated pawn position for black, where he has fianchettoed, but that makes some sense. Yeah, the bishop is actually fighting for this d4 square. Yeah, here Giri took on c6. This is the technical solution. You also had some alternatives here that he could have tried. For example, a move like bishop g5 came into consideration here, making some use also of the h-pawn. Yeah, this is an interesting move. If the black queen, for example, moves, you have knight b3, which is interesting. Yeah, something like this is a long line that is a little bit better for white. Yeah, you just have a bit more of more activity, more active pieces. Yeah, that's an interesting question again in the chat that I wanted to address. What about knight takes d4? Yeah, that's very true. That was an option, absolutely. After queen takes, knight d5, the white queen has to move again, so probably here. And after knight takes, pawn takes, we get this position. The issue with this is that white is a little bit quicker in development, and black's queen side is not so easily developed. However, the c3 pawn is weak, so this is definitely a playable option for black. Yeah, there was no big issue with it. So we had this in the game. And after all those trades, we get to a position where white must be better. Yeah, the bishop is just better on g2. However, this is just a relatively small advantage. So, yeah, this is, I think this is from Jubojevic. Yeah, I think Jubo said that white is very clearly slightly better, something like that. Yeah, so it's clear that white must be a bit better, but it's not something super obvious or super substantial that he has. We have to look at the clocks here. Both players played this really quickly, so it was probably part of preparation, which is kind of remarkable, as this is a pretty obscure line. So bishop a6. And I think the next couple of moves, they look fairly normal, let's say. Rook d1. So black has gotten this bishop to c4. There's this position, and there's some resemble. It resembles a line in the Nimzo with knight f3 and g3. Maybe someone who knows the theory of the Nimzo, yeah, knows what I'm talking about. This is very comparable. White should trade queens as a suggestion. Yeah, maybe, but it's not so easy to do. Not so easy to do. To force the trade. Yeah, queen d2 was played by Giri, and maybe queen d4 is an option. Yeah, hello to Bayerischer Schweizer in the chat, and he says hello from Stavanger. Yes, he's at the tournament venue, so that is what I learned earlier. So queen d2, and here h5 played by white. An interesting way for Giri to get some things going. Yeah, the a2 pawn is given up. So takes and queen d4. So white has some activity, and he has an idea to play h6. So black has to be very, very careful there. Yeah, how should he try to defend? There are certainly some options. He played this move c5, which is probably not the best. Black can also take, and in the short time that I had to look at the game, I didn't really find something substantial here for white. Yeah, after the capture, that's at least what my notes say. Yeah, white can try queen f4, approaching everything here, but there's this queen b1 resource where black is coming back to cover everything, and I don't see much for white. Yeah, white has no real risk here. He can always play for a perpetual check on the g5 and f6 square, but I think black does defend. In the game you played c5, queen e3, and now there's not such a clear-cut way for black to defend this. He played a4 and king to g2, just going out of the checks. So a good prophylactical move. This is a very important concept sometimes. Like when you're attacking, you need to make sure to reduce opponent's counterplay. And sometimes a move like this, going out of the checks, is a really good decision. Yeah, the position gets critical now for black. Queen b1 was played, and Giri played h6. Giri played h6, just intending queen e5. And this is very, very substantial threat. Yeah, if black does nothing, then queen e5, threatening mate, f6, queen c7 is end of game. So queen to f5, black returns and covers the e5 square, g4, queen f6, and queen takes c5. Yeah, now white definitely is better. Yeah, after e4, the black bishop is pushed back, and black is in some trouble. Bishop on a8. But we know that So is a very, very resourceful defender. He hasn't lost a game, or he had a run of undefeated games last year, leading or stretching right into 2017. That was remarkable. But definitely white is better. Rook a7 was played. e5 took it. So white is a pawn up, and now queen f4. Yeah, the h6 pawn is also hanging, and yeah, what Giri did was queen e3, and I don't know if you can win after that. It's probably very difficult, but it's hard to say. In all those endings, white looks better, but winning is a different kind of thing. I can show you what happened in the game. So traded and played rook c8, and it's very difficult for white to make some headway. Yeah, you cannot really cross the 4th, 5th rank with the pawn, and this bishop looks extremely passive. It looks at the 2 pawns here. In the game, Giri got absolutely nowhere after rook a5. Yeah, this we had this trade, and I think this is probably just a draw. I don't really see white winning here. So probably somewhere here, Giri should have tried to keep the pawn. But if that wins or not is very tough to say. If you ask me, I don't think white can win, which leads back to positions here. Maybe white has to do something different here, and try to prevent this trading down to this ending. Of course, the ending looks good. Yeah, it's a pawn and it's completely risk-free, but maybe you cannot win. In the game, we had this, and okay, it's a pawn, but there's simply no way forward. They continued this for a little while, but it's not a big problem to hold.
Check.
Like, it's just staying.
Check. Check.
Yeah, you got checks from the back, and now
check.
We had
check.
I don't even know how long they played this out, because I stopped at one point. Yeah, here they agreed to a draw after going back and forth. Yeah, you cannot win this ending. Yeah, after queen e3, the pawn structure here is so devalued that probably white has no real chances to win. Let's go now to the 2 most interesting games of this round. Let's go to Caruana Anand first. Here we have an English opening with an early bishop to b4 by Anand. This is one of the lines that he has played a lot recently in the last year. And it's a very interesting line to recommend, because also for club players, for players that are not on the world-class level, because it's a very easy to play move. It starts on move 2 very early on, and there are little alternatives. If white plays this, you have an easy solution with c6. Yeah, of course it's a fight, an interesting game, but you have a pretty straightforward way here to play, trying to play d5, and it gets concrete very quickly. Or you play knight c3 and you go bishop b4. And Anand's line is interesting. After knight d5, he goes back to c5. Now in order to push the knight back and play d6. So he plays the bishop out of the pawn chain, and what black does looks a little bit like the bishop's game or the Italian game. Yeah, like e4, bishop out, d3, c3. This is colors reversed. And white has this kind of Sicilian type development with the c-pawn. So we had e3, and again bishop b4. It's really funny. Yeah? The bishop is dancing back and forth, but we get a perfectly normal looking position. Yeah? This is outside of the pawn chain, ready to trade, and black structure is perfectly sound.
Check.
Yeah, this was played in the game. And now a very interesting moment, because black now has a fundamental decision. Yeah, what about the central tension, the d and e pawn? We have this central tension, and Anand decides to play the move e4. That's interesting. Yeah, oftentimes you want to stay on the dark squares because you have the light squared bishop, but in this particular case he decides to play it differently. The thing is, he gets lots of space, yeah, with this. Yeah, it looks a little bit like a French defense reversed. What black also has is, with this light squared bishop, he has got many pieces that can control light squares. And this is what we see pretty quickly as Anand takes on c4. Interesting decision. He does not keep the center, but takes away from the center. But what he gets is, he gets d5 control. Knight b6 and to d5. So he has a nice space advantage and good control over the light squares. White has the bishop pair, of course, and already some space gain on the queen side. It's tough to say. I think it's roughly equal. I would probably like to play black here. I always value space quite highly, and I think that the bishop on c1 is slightly iffy. It's not such a great piece. Okay, queen d2. And I think next moves look fairly normal. Yeah? Rook e6, probably intending to lift on the 6th rank. a6, yeah. Currently b5 is tough to play. Knight e8, an interesting choice. Yeah, the rook is opened up on the 6th rank, and the knight might have a good square on d6. Here comes the rook, and we see that there is a problem for white. He cannot castle. We have to quickly check. This is just hanging. And yeah, well, rook g1 is not a move. Yeah, he played g3, and that's not a happy move. Yeah, white is weakening the light squares quite a bit, and it also makes it a lot more difficult in the future to play the f-pawn. So I think a fairly comfortable position for Anand here. Knight comes to d6, a5. White is totally shutting down the queen side, and not an easy decision, but at least it feels reasonably safe on that side. This is also why he castled long. It looks a bit funny because white has all those pawns, yeah, advanced, but it's not the position doesn't open up all that quickly. Yeah, it's not easy to give white some advice. Yeah, you can really question the long castles, but what exactly do you do? Yeah, you can also just stay. The main problem is that there is not much in terms of pawn levers for white. b5 is not possible. d5, nope. Yeah, there's just the knight blocking, and you cannot play the f-pawn either. Yeah, it's really difficult. So the only side that can do something is actually black. Yeah, black can maneuver with the pieces, or long-term play like f5, g5, f4, very long-term. So it's not very nice to be white here because you don't have a clear-cut plan. This is also with a5. a5 was kind of saying, okay, I'm trying to batten down the hatches, somehow hold the thing, but it's really a one-sided position. So long castles, queen c8 to provoke a weakness, and now Anand opens it up. It's very, very logical to do this and get to open the f file where you have a target ultimately on f2. Now I've got h4. And got this trade. Yeah, a bit of a surprise. Yeah, the capture with the h-pawn. Bishop g6 was the more normal looking move, and after this I think black is still more comfortable. Yeah, you can slowly try to play against this pawn or potentially the h4 pawn. Yeah, this is still quite good for black. Again, it was never a decisive advantage, but it's just comfortable. He took with the pawn, surprisingly, and now Caruana went h5 and tried for some counterplay. So check my notes here. g5 and h6, yeah, going for something against the king. g6. White is not really getting anywhere soon. yeah, with this h-pawn issue. Again, it's difficult for him to open lines. The h-pawn, for example, can also be picked up later. Yeah, in the game, now the move bishop b2 was played, which was probably not the best decision. Yeah, here black had a threat which was not addressed. Probably, yeah, he had to play something like bishop d1 here. Yeah, why is that? Yeah, the move bishop g4 is an idea, and here you can go bishop b3 at least. In the game, after this, bishop g4, yeah, you have a problem there with this bishop. You don't want to trade. This is the first thing. If you trade after queen takes, it's really awkward. Yeah, the light squares are now dead, and you have the simple queen g1 threat. Here white is probably busted. So if you cannot take, what should white do? Yeah, he played bishop f1, but now, after this, we see that this rook is really in trouble. It has no squares, and this is now just a weakness. Yeah, the second problem is that it's extremely easy for black to play. Yeah, you just improve all your pieces, and white has this incarcerated bishop, which is really awful. So Anand picked up the h6 pawn and has an extremely good position. Yeah, Caruana has very little that he can do. He's basically without counterplay.
Check.
Yeah, and here Caruana resigned, yeah, because bishop c4 and then winning on the light squares is such an enormous idea. It cannot be defended. So a nice game by Anand, and Caruana really had totally yeah, prospectless is the right word, maybe, position after a5, after he decided to shut this down. It's always difficult to play such a move, yeah, to basically say, okay, I'm just trying to somehow hold the position. I don't think he should have done that. It just very one-sided and tough for white to get any activity after this move. So not a really convincing game by Caruana. What you can take from this game, if you like, is the opening. This is a really nice way of playing for black without a huge theoretical workload, so something that I can recommend. So let's go to check the final game to look at. I have to see that my notes are in right order, just too many games. Okay, we've got the game Aronian Kramnik. Aronian played a fantastic game in one of the earlier rounds against Carlsen, winning very nicely, and now he's playing Kramnik. We got this, the semi-Tarrasch or improved Tarrasch defense, a line that Kramnik has played quite frequently in recent years. After c takes, knight takes, e4, we have the main line of this opening, and
check.
After
check.
this trade of two pairs of minor pieces, we have the defining pawn structure. In fact, this pawn structure is well known from the Grünfeld. Yeah, this is essentially a Grünfeld where black has not fianchettoed the bishop, but rather has traded it off. So it's a slightly simplified position, which is pawn structure-wise comparable, but very much different because of those trades and some specifics of the position. We see what Kramnik is doing. He's playing the knight to d7, bishop to b7, and is basically waiting what white is going to do in the center. White has two basic ideas, or maybe three. Yeah, we have the pushes in the center, d5 or e5, or an idea that he also has sometimes, not so much here probably, is to push the a pawn. Sometimes this is an idea as well. White playing the pawn to a5, trading, and then that's a wrong arrow, trading on b6 and playing against a weak pawn. That's a bit of a rare approach. Mostly white is trying to do something in the center with the pawn pushes, and this is what Aronian is doing here. Immediately he plays d5. This is actually not a very common position. This specific position is rather rare. Yeah, Kramnik played the move knight c5, which makes sense certainly. I put this on a good square, attack e4, and yeah, open up the queen against d5. Rook e1, centralizing, and queen to f6. Queen e3, rook c8, and e5. So Aronian is pushing forward. He does not want to just sit around. This move is a very, let's say, committal decision. After e5, queen g6, he goes d6. So white is pushing those pawns. He gets a protected pass pawn, but on the other hand, black gets some activity here, in particular with his bishop here. The light squared bishop is getting quite strong. It's a very tough to evaluate position, really tough, and lots of it mostly depends on precise calculation now. Black now decided to do something. I think that is something that he has to also do. He cannot just sit around. If you give white enough time, then the two pawns or this pawn construction will be too dangerous. So Kramnik played f6. This is obviously a somewhat risky move because of this. The bishop is looking strong on that diagonal. Knight h4. Queen to g4. And g3. Important feature of the position is that the black queen does not have all that many squares. Just a second. Yeah, Kramnik now went with the capture on e5. And this is probably questionable. It's not clear that white has something substantial after a move like rook cd8. This makes sense anyway, yeah, to put some pressure on this. Yeah, what does white play? Yeah, probably f4 is a candidate move. No? And now black has to see if he can get some direct counterplay. What I checked briefly is the move g5. I know it looks a little bit off, but you have to check those kind of things. It's just if white takes after queen takes, black is probably all right. Yeah, for example,
Check.
This is nothing because the knight doesn't have a good square. If we go back after this, f4, g5, white should probably play differently. Yeah, there are a couple of things. You can even look at f5, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, if black now takes, f takes e6, looks quite dangerous for black. I still think rook cd8 was probably the better choice compared to taking. After f takes e5, which was played in the game, white just recaptured, and this is just extremely weak. This is just extremely weak, and there's an additional idea, f4, f5. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions, guys. Someone says that I talk so much and it doesn't have any question, but you just go ahead if you feel like there's something to ask. Yeah, f4, f5 is an additional problem here with the king. Probably Kramnik now should have played king h8, but it's also not a position where you're particularly happy, probably. Yeah? Let's say f4. And what exactly are you doing now? I don't quite see how black's play continues. Yeah, doesn't look all that great. Yeah, rook d8 played by Kramnik, and now a very strong move by Aronian. I mean, it's not so difficult to see, but what you have to see is that this is not a good idea, because you're selling off far too cheaply. Yeah, after this, you've got some trades coming, and bishop d5 at the end. Rook e7, rook f7. and white is not really crashing through. Main issue is that now the knight doesn't make any sense on h4, and black is probably surviving this. In some cases you can play like g5 and take the knight to bail out to some rook ending a pawn down that you can draw. This is a very important thing. Don't sell your position too cheaply. Aronian played f4, and that threatens f5, which is an extremely strong threat. Kramnik played rook f6. We can look at some alternatives. If he would have played king h8, getting out of the diagonal, we see the second idea, this one. And oops, the queen is short of squares. Where is she supposed to go? Yeah, you can go to h3, but after queen h5, there's knight g6, and the queen here is hanging. It all looks kind of funky because the queen has some ideas there, but on h4 it's covered. Here black loses. Yeah? After king g8, bishop g4, it is ultimately trapped. Yeah, rook f6 was played. What else is there? He could have tried this one, but here white will probably just win the pawn. And now rook e7 maybe, yeah? Or knight f3. It all looks pretty strong. Yeah, this is maybe the strongest move. Just go on to the 7th rank. Yeah, it's tough to defend for Kramnik. Yeah, it's probably just a position that you cannot hold. He played rook to f6, and Aronian now played rook c3. Yeah, what is the point of this move? We can look at some alternatives. If white plays f5, that is not bad, but not as powerful as rook c3. We have to check what is the idea. We've looked at this idea of trapping the queen, yeah, with bishop e2. If you do that now, queen here, and then the same idea with queen h5, black has this funny move. Yeah, it's an important resource. Otherwise, that would be pretty strong. It's interesting that white here can do this and play bishop f1 and do a perpetual on the queen. Don't see that all that often. It's a draw. Yeah, he played rook c3, and this gives some additional ideas in relation to bishop e2. So yeah, if black, yeah, what should black do? What did he play actually? I don't remember. Played rook h6. Yeah, there's not much else. Rook h6, bishop e2, queen here, and queen g5. Yeah, and now this is a big threat. Bishop g4. Yeah, Kramnik is running out of ideas. Yeah, you also have to see that just in passing. Yeah, this is also a threat. Yeah, so Kramnik found the only resource that continues the game. Queen takes. It's a funny move. Yeah? You get the queen back, but white is of course just material up. Played rook d1.
Check.
And after he got the queen back, white is an exchange up and still has a marvelous initiative. So black will not be able to defend this. Yeah, here this rook e7. And here Kramnik resigned. So another pretty convincing win by Aronian. The decisive part of this game was right after white had installed those pawns, like here. The next couple of moves are probably decisive. Maybe f6 wasn't all that great with hindsight. Yeah? When we check here, we know that this is leading to big trouble, and I suggested rook cd8, but this is also, now that I look at it again, it looks wrong. Yeah, maybe black shouldn't have played f6, but how do you get any counterplay there? Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of black's position. I really don't see a great alternative. F6 I actually find reasonably logical. Trying to get rid of the supporting pawn and get the F file open, but this concept by Aronian is tough for black. It's really tough for black. Yeah, so a great win for the Armenian #1, and as I read, he also has crossed the 2,800 mark again. Yeah, so Aronian is back among the elite players with a 2,800 rating after he had some rough time in recent years. Yeah, this has been a look at all of the games, and it actually is just on time, basically, for the start of the following show. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the round recap of round 6 of the Altibox Norway Chess. This tournament has 9 rounds total, and on Tuesday the 13th there will be a rest day, so it continues on Wednesday with the final 3 rounds to come. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and for those watching it live, I'll be on very shortly with my Blitz show on the other stream. There's another other YouTube link that you have to go to. Yeah, thanks a lot, and I'll be back in just a minute or so. Thanks.